Good to see everyone this morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Andrew Clark, and I direct the Institute for Municipal and Regional Policy here at UConn. Welcome to the second in our series of three, well, at least three, webinars exploring the Norwegian justice system relative to our system here in Connecticut. We're joined today by a great panel of local folks here from Connecticut, including moderator Kelan Lyons from the Connecticut Mirror, as well as three individuals from a Norwegian prison, one of whom we've met previously, for those who have joined us in the past, a few years ago at the beginning of COVID. We had a similar event, a webinar, when we all switched to Zoom with Ellen Shee, who's the prison director at Indre Ostfold prison in Norway. As we begin, I just want to also introduce Erika Nowakowski from the Tau Youth Justice Institute, as we are both sponsoring this series. Erika?
Good morning. Thank you so much, Andrew, and thank you everybody for joining us today. We're very excited to be engaged in this communication and conversation, and we look forward to learning a lot from you all, and hopefully it's information that we can bring forward back to our leadership here in Connecticut and work together to improve the lives of our youth who are at risk or are involved in the justice system. So I look forward to learning a lot from you all. Thank you so much.
Great, and as Erika mentioned, we will be talking a little bit about the youth system in Norway today as well, because as we have learned, the prison that Ellen is director of is also has youth in the facility. But first, I'll just start with a quick presentation about the Norwegian system. We heard a little bit about it in our first webinar, and just going to expand on that a little bit with a particular focus on Indre Ostfold. So as I mentioned, this is the part 2 in the series. We entitled it A Look Inside the System. Here's a map of Europe, and you'll see Norway at the top of that. And what does the Norwegian population look like? Just as a reminder for folks, Norway is a little bit bigger than Connecticut, 5.4 million people, the population density of 35 people per square mile, the largest city being Oslo, which is about 2.5 times bigger than our largest city, currently Bridgeport. The median age is 40 years old approximately, and it's about a 50-50 split in gender. As I mentioned the last time, Norway doesn't collect demographic information by race or ethnicity. And as we learned from Professor Uglevik, that actually harkens back to the Holocaust, and where Norway, as well as much of Europe, collected demographic information very well, but that was used by the Nazis to be able to determine where the Jewish people were. And therefore, they decided after that to stop collecting and sharing that information. And so they just do it by country. So we have Norway, and then we have European, and then other. And then in Norway, you have the 60,000 Sami, and that's the indigenous population. Connecticut, what are we looking like? Well, we're about 2 million less in our total population, 3.5. Our population density, you'll see, is a lot more than Norway. Our largest city, as I mentioned, Bridgeport, 143,000. And we're roughly the same median age and roughly the same gender breakdown. We do collect demographic information where about 70, and this is the 2020 census, about 76% white population, 10% Black, and then I think we're roughly about 16% Latino population. You'll see the others there too. And as we know in Connecticut, that population is not reflected in our prison population, where it's predominantly Black or Latino. So let's look at the prison rates. In the US, the prison population, it's one of the biggest jailers, if not the biggest jailers in the world. The population rates are roughly 737 per 100,000 individuals. In Connecticut, and this is as of May 5th of this year, we're actually a little bit lower now, but 9,912 prisoners, 278 per 100,000. And I'll just do a little side note there. Just when you're thinking about what does 278 per 100,000 mean, and we've been dealing with COVID. I read an article this morning about California and a real concern about an uptick in COVID there. And that uptick that they're concerned about is roughly amounts to 100 cases per 100,000 individuals. So you can see the rest of countries, some countries in Europe here listed here. And then we go down to Norway. And these are statistics from, again, Professor Uglevik from the last presentation, where they have a prison population of 2,900 and the 54 per 100,000. You'll see the unsentenced prisoners are 15%, where ours are roughly 40%. It's a much bigger population. Now, a little bit about the correctional service, and we did learn about it before, but I think it's important to note, and you can find this, the nice thing about even though they speak Norwegian, they translate a lot in English in their correctional service and on the web. And so you can find these pretty readily if you're looking to search that. And so you'll see the correctional service, the task of the directorate is the proper execution and remand of prison sentences with due regard to the security of all citizens in an attempt to prevent recidivism by enabling offenders through their own initiatives to change their criminal behavior. And so a primary purpose of the sentence is to prevent the commission of new criminal acts and reassure society that within this framework ensures satisfactory conditions for prisoners. Openness, respect, professionalism, and commitment are all hallmarks of the Norwegian system. And now we've learned this in the past, but it's worth repeating. The principle of normality in the correctional service is a large driver of how they do their business. They consider punishment as the restriction of liberty. That's important because it puts punishment in a particular place, whereas as we're full well aware in the American system in Connecticut, punishment bleeds into everything that we do. No other rights have been removed by the sentencing court. That means, you know, as we've been talking about parole rights or probation rights in terms of voting over the years, they don't take voting rights away. They think that's important because of the notion of someone having the same or similar experience inside as they would outside, and that allows for the better transition of the individual. And no one shall serve their sentence under stricter circumstances than necessary for the security in the community. And therefore, the offenders are placed in the lowest possible security regime. And during, as I mentioned, during the serving of a sentence, life inside will resemble life outside as much as possible. And we'll see some pictures of Indre Ostfold to get a sense of what that looks like, and we'll be able to talk to the prison officers to get a better sense of what that means. Import model. And now this is another really important facet of the system that allows life inside to replicate life outside as much as possible. Crucial services for reintegration are delivered to the prison by local and municipal service providers. Prisoners do not have their own staff delivering medical, which we do here in Connecticut, educational, which we do here in Connecticut, library, which we do here in Connecticut. These are imported from the community, so it's run by the community. And also different faith and clergy services are provided through an import model, which I believe are done. Although they are also, I believe, employed by DOC. And they say the advantages are a better continuity of deliverance of services. The offender will already have established contact during his time in prison, involvement from the community with the prison system, more and better cross connections, and we'll listen and hear about the Red Cross and what they do with youth. in Norway, and an improvement of the image of prisons and prisoners. And that's important. The services in question are financed by other bodies as they are part of the rights of any inhabitant in Norway. The other thing that's really important in terms of youth in Norway is they abide by the UN rights of the child, something that, again, the US does not. So what does that mean in terms of reintegration? So in accordance with the principle of normality, progression through a sentence should be aimed at reentering to the community. So everything is geared towards reentry, as we're hearing. The more institutionalized a system is, the harder it will be to return to freedom. Think of someone serving a 30-year sentence in Connecticut, where it isn't necessarily services from the outside being performed, and you're not necessarily living in a cell or a room that reflects what you would be looking like on the outside. Therefore, not to mention the length of sentences, and I'm sure we'll hear about that later as well. Therefore, one will proceed towards release gradually from high security prisons to lower security prisons through halfway houses and finally execution of the sentence outside of prison, unless security reasons dictate otherwise. Probation is stimulated and the correctional services will try to arrange for a process where serving the sentence is adjusted to individual risks, needs, and resources, unless security reasons predict otherwise, which does sound similar to what we do here in Connecticut. So where is the prison that we're talking about? That's the Indre Ostfold prison. It's the Eidsberg department. And here you can see a picture of that relative to Oslo. It's a unit with a high level of security for men. Now, this is back in 2020, and Ellen, you can correct me if it's changed. The prison has an ordinary capacity of 102 seats. So prisons in Norway are a lot smaller. And one of the reasons we learned from that in the last webinar is also because they're supposed to be situated as close to where the individual lives as possible. It has an organized service for 25 to 40 young inmates between the ages of 18 and 25, an intoxicant ward according to the snifter model, and I'm not sure what that is. Maybe we can hear about that. And will, in addition, receive all categories of inmates. Okay, so here's some pictures from Indre Ostfold that Ellen was kind enough to send the last time. And maybe, Ellen, we can bring you in here and you can walk us through some of these pictures.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, good evening to you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just to go home soon. No, now you see the yard, one of the yards where the inmates are 1 hour at a time. And here is the old prison with a restrictive department. We always have these security cells. This is a new toilet in the big block. Every cell has this one for themselves: shower, toilet, and a sink. Here we play balls, football, basketball, and other activities.
And this is partly, I recognize this from the video that you all did at the beginning of COVID, which we shared with folks. We probably won't play it this morning, but and we'll share it with folks afterwards. But can you tell us a little bit about that video?
The video from the youth week.
Not the youth week, the one where you were dancing the pit bull.
Yes. The COVID dance.
Yes.
Yeah, we have this.
The activity unit.
Yeah. We have this employer there who is really good at the dancing. So she orchestrated the whole thing with the inmates, the staff, the health department, the school, the leaders in the prison. Yeah, so we danced and she put it all together, and it was a big hit, and it was really fun. Everybody together.
Yes, it was fun to watch as well.
Yeah.
And not something that you traditionally would see here in the U.S. So here's another picture.
Yeah, this is from the room with the visits. When you have the children visits, for example, this is one of the rooms, how they look like when they come from the outside to visit their father or their brother or a friend.
We have actually renewed this room now.
Yeah.
So it's much nicer now.
It's nicer.
Even nicer.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure the audience will be able to participate, and there may be questions about some of these pictures going forward. But for now, we can just talk about briefly what they mean and what they're representing.
This is one cell from the old block again, from 1856, the old prison. We have just 6 rooms there. And this is the common area in one unit. There are 12 inmates, and there is their living room. And this is the kitchen. They have one drawer each, where there's a lock. So they keep the lock and they have their things there, food and stuff.
Does everyone have access to the kitchen?
Yeah, every in the unit, the 12 inmates have access to the kitchen. And this is one room or cell, if you want to call it that.
Okay. And that's all that I had in terms of the PowerPoint in the presentation. And now I'm going to pass it over to Kelan Lyons. Kelan from the Connecticut Mirror. We're very fortunate to have moderating today, who's been a great reporter in Connecticut. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail towards the end. But Kelan, why don't you kick us off with the conversation?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kelan Lyons. We're formerly with the Connecticut Mirror. Hope everyone's doing well this morning. Grateful to be here. I wanted to start the questions off. Those pictures were pretty stunning. I was muted, but I audibly gasped when I saw some of them. I wanted to ask Ellen, if you can you walk us through, like, I don't know, what's a day look like for a person incarcerated there? How much time are they out of their cell? What are they doing when they're out of their cell? How often are they, like, in a common space? Are they celled? Are they in with their own cells? Do they have a cellmate? Can you just walk us through all that?
I can take it. They are locked out in the 7:30 in the morning. Then they have half on 30 minutes to make breakfast, things like that. And then they are going to school 8 o'clock. School, job, activities, maybe training, something like that. And then they are on the school and job to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And then they're going up in their cells. They're making dinner and eating dinner from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And then they are locked in 1 hour because then the officers have their break. And after that 1 hour break, they are locked out again. And then they are going out in the yard for 1 hour. And after that 1 hour, they are all the evening in the picture we showed you in the unit. Then they are making, like, food, they are watching TV, playing chess, PlayStation, things like that. And then are locked in the evening, 8:30 on the evening. So yeah, that's a typical day for an inmate.
Got it. Okay. And what do the incarcerated folks have to buy? Like, do they pay for the telephone? Do they have to buy the television itself? I mean, like, is there a commissary? We have a commissary where you can buy items here.
Yeah, they have a shop. They are buying groceries 1 time in a week. And they are buying all kind of stuff like food, candy, smoke, things like tobacco, things like that. And the TV, it's free, or they need to.
They pay
$4 a day, I think. Yeah, what is that, like 40 cents or something?
Yeah. A day per day.
Yeah. And they can call 20 minutes 30 minutes actually in the week. And then they maybe need to pay like, $5. Yeah, something like that in the week. So, yeah.
And the groceries, I mean, how do they acquire the groceries? Like, do they go to a grocery store? Does someone go out and get it for them?
We have it here. Yeah.
They get
the grocery store
inside. And they have this card with them. and the economy office in the prison puts an amount in the week. They can shop for until 1,200 Norwegian crowns in 1 week. That's
$12 maybe? No, 120. 120, yeah.
Dollars a week. And so they're going down themselves, shop, pay, and go back up and put it in the fridge and arrange everything. Especially in the evenings, they are making food together, like a social thing. So they plan in advance you are going to buy the meat, you are going to buy the other things, and so they do this as a group activity also.
Okay, and Mr. Robert Gillis, I know you're a member of Stop Solitary Connecticut, and you used to be a prison warden here in Connecticut. Can you talk a little bit about where you were warden first off, and how what you just heard is different or similar to your experience in the Connecticut prison system?
It's vastly different. I was, my first warden's post was at a small driving while intoxicated facility in Middletown. We had a population of 65 inmates there, and they were all ages. From there, I moved to New Haven Correctional Center, which was a high security level, primarily pretrial facility. And from there, after 2 or 3 years, I went to the Gates Correctional Institution, which it's now closed, but it was a minimum security institution, dormitory style. It finally topped out about 1,100 inmates by the time that I left. It was big, and I really enjoyed working there because we were able to do a lot of programming and things like that. Relied heavily on our school district to help out with instructional programs and some voc ed programs. Had a couple of people who were participating in educational release at a local community college. I really enjoyed working there, but it was still a prison. There's no question about it. I'm curious about the accommodations in the cells in the institution in Norway. And I've got a number of questions. I don't know if this is the time to jump into it, but I'm very interested in the implementation of a model such as the one that you are responsible for. Now, implementation is one of the principal areas in which any good idea can fail. It's also one of those things where even bad ideas can work if implementation goes properly. What existed before the unit that you have now?
We've had this system for quite a while now, but the changes came, it was political. It started with a political change. So we get all these plans, and but in maybe, let's see, 5 to 10 years, these new prisons like ours have made, but it has grown from some facilities. We had the joint areas where the prisoners are outside together. We have had that for quite some years, but it has grown to be more and more and more. That's maybe the implementation. That's how we have done it. We started with something, and the focus from the top, the political, has been they are supposed to be outside as much as they can.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's from the top. So we just work, we have to find also ourselves the best way to do that. We get the orders from the government, and we have to find the best ways to do it ourselves.
Now,
maybe not a good answer, but
in the unit that you're responsible for with the younger offenders, and I'm going to take the total 15 through 25 age group, but based on what I've read, you sort of split that group in half, 18 to 25 and under one group, and 15 to 18 others. how many of the people who are in your system, how many are there in that age group? Do you have those figures handy?
Like how many young inmates in the whole system or only ICE?
The whole system, yes.
The whole system, okay. Well, in the last few years, it's been more of these young inmates. So
don't have the exact number, but yeah.
Only here in Eidsberg, we have 20 all the time, from the age from 18 to 24. And the other prisons there maybe the same. It's yeah.
So there are people in this age group in other prisons as well.
Yes.
Okay. And do they have the same? Does the same management plan manifest itself in the other facilities for this age group?
Well, in Eidsberg, what is special with Eidsberg prison is that we have a youth team. And that was established in 2020 and has now been a project for 2 years. But now we can see that other prisons in Norway are also starting the project with the youth team in their prison, because they have seen that it's working very well in Eidsberg prison and are now starting the projects in, I don't know, but I think around maybe the biggest prisons. So, yeah.
Is there a noticeable staff resistance toward implementation of this management plan? You're smiling, Ellen. What does that mean?
Yeah, there has been some resistance, yes, because there will be some people will be treated differently, and that's not what people don't like that. So so the young offenders here get more attention. They get more. They get more attention. They do more. They get more out time. Yeah, and that's. But we're slowly getting there. So, thanks to these guys, now our prison don't have that much resistance. Everybody's working together now.
This is also kind of a new prison, you know. So if we establish this team in an old prison, I think we would have much more problems in the start, you know, to work like we do. It's not goes well with everyone who work in the prison system.
I mean, I'm asking this question because I am particularly interested in organizational culture. And you know, the old saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. You can bring individual staff into your operation, and I believe they would adapt quickly to your management plan. I've also heard the term, you know, there are bad apples, but I believe that there are bad barrels too. And well-established facilities which have more repressive practices breed that kind of negative behavior from staff. And I mean, I think your idea is a great one. The only problem that I see in terms of transitioning to a system such as ours is I don't believe we could do this for everybody in that age group. It's too large. Anyway, I don't want to monopolize this conversation. Do you have any questions for me?
Do you have anything special for the young offenders? Nothing at all? For those under 25, 24? Or are they treated just like everybody else?
There is a different plan for people 18 through 25 than there is for all the other adult offenders. The younger than 18s, I really have not had any direct dealings with, and I'm not competent to give an opinion on that. We do have a youth facility, but it is basically young adults. And we had a commissioner after I left working in the system, who recognized the fact that young men, particularly up to the point that they reach age 25, are really sort of half-baked. And requires some development progress after that. And the institutional plan should be developed to accomplish that, but I don't know that it is. Okay.
Yeah. Just one more comment.
Yes.
One comment about it's really, really important with the communication in this, when you implement these things about the cultures. We have spent a lot of time communicating with the other staff members, repeating and discussing. So there's a lot of job that has been done and are ongoing all the time to get everybody on board with these things.
Yeah, my statement, well, not a statement, my overall philosophy when I was running facilities is that the warden has to be out front on the issues and be a communicator. And I'm sure you do this. You're constantly walking around talking to residents of the program and to the staff that are running it, because you have to develop a person in your own right who is viewed as being caring, concerned, and effective. Okay.
Interesting. I want to try to bring Christina into the conversation, the executive director of the Connecticut Justice Alliance. Christina, could you talk a little bit about, given Connecticut's racial demographics of its incarcerated population at 42% Black as of May 1st and 27% Latinx, could you talk about the role that race perhaps plays in the construction of Connecticut's prison system here?
Hi, everybody. Hello to Norway from Connecticut. Nice to see you all. Thanks for coming. Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I think the fact that if you were to visit any of Connecticut's prisons today, and especially our youth detention centers, we have one more youth prison that houses solely young women, you would see mostly Black and brown youth. The question that we ask a lot at the Connecticut Justice Alliance is, through research, we know that young people commit similar crimes, whether they're Black, brown, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever their race and ethnicity may be. However, Connecticut has found a way to either divert or otherwise handle young people who are not Black and brown, what crimes they commit or what crimes they are accused of committing. So our question always is why? And so that comes down to the bigger Black cloud and parlor over Connecticut and over, I would say, all of the United States of America, of racism and what we have to deal with here and how, where our roots began. I think it's an issue. And so we talk a lot about in Connecticut that both our prison population of older folks, so over 18, and then the under 18s has decreased over time, whether you're in prison or you're detained in a detention center. But that has not been the case for Black and brown people. It has either stayed the same or increased. They haven't had the same benefits that folks that are not Black and brown have had. So that's something that we spend a lot of time in trying to figure out and looking at numbers and different sort of like case stories of what happened, how did this person end up here, and why are they still here? Is it because of the color of their skin? We had some research done in 2017 that showed that yes, if you remove all other factors for why someone might be seen before a judge in a court or incarcerated or detained, it comes down to it's because of the color of their skin. There are no other factors that weighed in on that. And that's a problem. And we talked a little bit about there being a youth prison here within the Department of Corrections, and that's Manson Youth Institution. That's where young men are housed, ages 15 to 21, because in America, you can be charged as an adult starting at age 15 for certain crimes. And we also have York Correctional Institute where young women are held. So we can't forget about the young women. So both of those facilities are problematic, and I would say Manson even more so. I'm not sure if you've all approached this yet on previous panels, but Manson itself was found to violate the civil rights of children back in just last December 2021 by the federal government here, Department of Justice. So that's a concern. They say they're working on it, but it has been something that we have all been focused on about the amount of time that young people spend in solitary confinement, and that's mostly Black and brown youth. the amount of time that folks are not spending in school getting education and are not spending in any type of vocational or sort of like mental health, behavioral health programming. And that's mostly black and brown youth. Most of those kids are coming back home to their neighborhoods, and the fact that they are not getting the services they need is problematic because they will most likely end up right back where they left. And we see that's mostly black and brown youth again, so that's where the race piece comes in. And most of the neighborhoods that they come from are mostly composed of black and brown people. So we need to do some more investigating into that question as people of Connecticut of how can we do better.
Christina, as a follow-up, you mentioned, your organization works with young folks who are in the juvenile detention centers, as well as the prisons that you had mentioned at York and at Manson Youth Institution. What was your reaction to those pictures that we just saw of the Norwegian prison? And what do you think is holding Connecticut back from having its prisons be like that?
Sure, Kelan. I too had an audible gasp over here on my side of like, that looks great. The shining green grass and the nice kind of common area, the kitchen, because of what I know happens inside the Department of Corrections here for children and for adults. It's just a stark contrast. At the Connecticut Justice Alliance, we are all about treating people like humans and ending the dehumanization of people, and knowing that if you treat someone like a human, they're much better off and they are much, more likely to be able to be set on a path to be successful in life. I was asking myself that question because we have brought pictures of the inside specifically of Manson Youth Institution and showed those to sort of like a larger youth justice policy group here in Connecticut. We've showed those there, and we've also posted them on social media and stuff to say, look, this is what young people and even older folks in prison in Connecticut are dealing with. This is, are you okay with this, Connecticut? And people have kind of just said like, yeah, a lot of folks say, yes, we are okay with that because they've done something wrong and that's what they deserve. And then you'll have the other side of folks where we are saying, no, absolutely not. That's not okay. Nobody should have to live in those conditions. So I think what we're dealing with is a disagreement and a collision of thoughts. I think we are dealing with folks' inability and often unwillingness to be imaginative. And you don't even have to imagine, because we could just look at what y'all have in Norway and say, okay, we could do that too. Because we can do many things here if we push ourselves to in Connecticut, especially we're in a space where we have the funds to do it now. We should be doing that, and we do not. And I do believe that that's because the roots of America and even Connecticut is we believe that if somebody did something wrong, they should be punished and they should not receive the same treatment that any other person would receive, like a clean kitchen, groceries, time to spend with others cooking, books, a television. People just believe, let's cut them off. That will teach them a lesson, and really it doesn't.
Ellen, there's an interesting question in the chat here. I'm not sure if you'll have the statistics in front of you, but I mean, even anecdotally, do you know what are youth typically incarcerated for in Norway? I know in the last panel, there was a discussion about how that's sort of a last resort. I mean, what are the sort of crimes that young people end up getting locked up for over there?
It's usually violence, gang membership, something like this, shooting, knife stabbings.
Yeah. In the last time we have very big problems in Oslo, in the capital, with the gang crimes that Jonas said, and from the gang crime, it's very often like stabbing, shooting, things like that. And of course, narcotica, then selling narcotica.
And what about the success rates, the recidivism rates? I mean, I don't know if you have that data in front of you, but how often are the kids that you see when they leave, how often are they coming back?
When they come to us, they are in the age between 18 to 24, maybe 15 also, 15 to 18. And very often they are in the start of a criminal career, if you can call it like that. And so sometimes they're not coming back, and sometimes they come back. But that's not a lose for us, because we are seeing like we're starting a process here. They are young, they are maybe not finished with the criminal lives, but we are giving them a chance to get out and live as normal citizens. And if they are coming back, we are only continue with the progress that we started the last time. So that's how we see it.
And we don't have statistics on the resident. Sorry. We don't have it.
Cool. Can you talk about with all the freedom that the incarcerated folks get, like, is there like instances of violence? Like, are there assaults from the incarcerated people on other peers or on staff? What does that look like?
We have a lot of inside fights here in prison, yes, and it's often because of this outside environment, like from two different gangs. And we only have, as we talked about earlier today, we only have this staircase, who
between the units, yeah.
So it's really hard sometimes to keep them apart, because when they go to work, they sometimes meet each other, and they start to fight.
But violence against the officers, it's rarely happen. It's more between the inmates.
And how do you guys respond? I mean, what do you do with them when they commit that act of violence? Do you separate them from the rest of the population, or is it more like a restorative practice? And what does that look like after they attack someone?
Yeah, it depends. We have different tactics. Sometimes we separate them. We don't separate them from the others. We separate, if two inmates are fighting, we separate them. If they won't shake hands, we start with that. We try to see, is this just a spare of the moment, or is it deeper than that? If they shake hands and say, okay, we're finished, this will not happen again, we try, and they live in the same unit, we go for it again. Or we move one of them to another unit. But we always try to the restorative justice type of yeah.
But really, if they literally just shake hands, then it's done. They stay in they stay there.
Yeah, the conversation is a little bit longer than just shaking hands, but it also depends on how much violence there is, because we write reports and it gets we make reports and they maybe get a new sentence, because if they hit somebody and they get hurt, they get a new sentence, of course. But that's one thing. We still work with them and we want them to get along. And sometimes, often they do.
Yeah, like we were speaking earlier, when it's gang crime or different gangs and they fight, then it's a little more problems to maybe shake hands, because then it's going outside too, right? But if it's like they're fighting over some food or something like that, it's no problem to shake hands, maybe.
Bob, can you contrast that with your experience in the Connecticut system? I mean, how does the Connecticut prison system respond when an incarcerated person attacks another, or a staff for that matter? What happens to them?
It depends upon the extent of violence involved and what damage is incurred by other people. If there is serious injury and a crime has been committed, the person will be subject to arrest by the Connecticut State Police. They will come in and do an evaluation as to whether or not criminal charges are warranted. In any case, even for, I would consider them to be comparatively minor infractions. Incarcerated people are subject to terms of the Correctional Code of Penal Discipline, which is basically the whole internal, it's almost a judicial proceeding, although it's not exactly as up and up as that. There's a whole list of things that people can participate in that are bad, disobeying a direct order, assault, inciting to riot, possession of contraband, a whole range of things. And each one of these offenses is sort of codified, can be written up in what they call disciplinary report, And there is a panel usually consisting of a senior level supervisor and a counselor and maybe an officer or maybe another staff person to determine if the person is guilty as charged. And if he is, the usual penalty is movement to a segregated unit for punitive segregation. It's an elaborate process. It has a lot of flaws connected with it. The inmate who is charged has an opportunity to plead out to the charge in advance of having a hearing and supposedly ends up receiving a lesser penalty, although that's not always and not often the case. Everything is pretty much a lockstep from what happens based on an offense like that. If a person is viewed as being chronic, he might end up in a chronic disciplinary unit, which is more restrictive. How that's going to be impacted by the legislation that was passed 2 weeks ago, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of stuff that has to be worked out to review the finer points on that. But I don't know if I've answered your question, but the nature of the system is in and of itself punitive. It is geared for punishment when somebody does something wrong in the institution. Does it have a deterrent effect? I don't think so. It basically satisfies the system's need to justify its actions. I mean, how much restriction from contact with other people is appropriate? How much is enough and how much is too much? I believe in timeouts for very short periods of time, cooling off, and to allow people some time to think about, to reflect. But, you know, loading 10 days punitive seg onto 10 days so that you've got an ultimate of 30 is not allowed under the new statute. But the history is there, and it's probably still being done in various fashions today in many of our institutions.
There's a mention in the chat about the prison density within the U.S. and within Connecticut versus Norway system. I mean, Connecticut's prison system, I've done a lot of reporting on this, has sharply been reduced over the past couple of years during COVID. There's about 3,000 fewer people who are locked up today than there were then. So the density has changed significantly since the beginning of the pandemic. But Ellen, I was struck by Andrew's presentation on how few people were incarcerated at your facility specifically. Can you talk about, if you have any thoughts on whether the population density affects the incarcerated folks' behavior? Like, would having more people potentially lead to more instances of violence? And the other side of the coin, does having, more space lead to fewer instances of violence?
I have to ask, do you mean how the prison is built and how it looks
Do you mean the facilities, or do you mean if it's too much people in the same tight space, or what do you mean?
That one, too many people in the same tight space.
Yeah.
I think if I understand you right, I think it's of course, the more people, the more problems it's going to get in a tighter space. So I worked in prisons here in Norway who have the same kind of space and with 2 more cells, like 14 cells in one unit. So this often leads to more fights and intrigues in my experience. But yeah, I think it's.
But the environment has a lot to say. We see that, especially on the youngest one. They get their minds are not developed, so they take in everything. So when we put them, you saw the pictures of the old prison, the small old prison, and the cells. They are ending up there if something goes really wrong. They're ending up there, and we see how that affects them. That does not have a good effect on them. Then we try to get them back to the other unit as soon as possible because it gets destructive really quick. and that's what they are doing. They are getting them back on track to the right places. Yeah, because it matters.
And Ellen, Bob talked about isolation. Under what circumstances would lead you folks to put someone in isolation? How long would they be in isolation? Is there like an age limit? Like, would you not put like a under 18-year-old in isolation? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Can you take the under 18?
Yeah, it's what do you call it? It's
On own
legislation. No, legislation.
Yeah.
it's like own laws for the minors. They are not following the same rules as the adult prisoners. Yeah.
But when we have someone underneath 18 years of age, we have to go and see to them in every 15 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
If they are locked in solitary, something like this.
So that's like this. This last way out is to put the minors in solitary. Then it needs to be something like if they are like takes their own life or something like that. Then we have to do these things.
The other inmates we lock them up in their own cell if they having a fight, or when you see they are have taken drugs or something, when they see they are have the impact on them, and if they are threatening an officer, threatening other inmates, and fighting. We depend on how cruel it is, but normally we put them in their own room, lock the door, and we give them this paper. It will say what the reason is why we're locking you out from the others. And as often, I think we have 24 hours is that's a long time for us to keep someone in detention. We are going back to them during this time to check, have you cooled down? Why are you doing this? And we are trying to get them to both cool down and talk about it. I think, but it's 24 hours is normally a maximum. Yeah.
And we have to say it's as you asked before, if they have some kind of attack or something against the staff, it's usually more harsh punishment. Yeah. We have this kind of talk with them to maybe shake their hands later, but it's usually they are moved from this unit and after this restricted.
Interesting. Thank you. Christina, I want to bring you in. What's your reaction to that? I mean, how does that contrast with what you hear with the young folks you work with in Connecticut system? I'm specifically interested to hear your thoughts on the restorative justice model that they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like all the things that we should be doing here, and sort of the opposite of what happens with young people, because young people get in a fight or sprayed with chemical agents here, pepper spray. That's used a lot as a deterrent, and lots of the explanation from the Department of Correction as well. If we weren't able to use chemical agents on kids, there would be a lot more staff injuries, and our pushback as well. If you had a better culture and weren't treating them the way you were, there wouldn't be all of this fight and all of the issues. So why can't you fix that? And there's not much movement there. I think it's just so helpful to hear that other places are doing restorative justice in the way that it should be done. That gives me hope that it could maybe someday be sort of replicated here and done here, with all people and especially young people. Yeah, I think, we just went through a period of time where different groups of people in Connecticut wanted to make it easier to send children to adult prison, where they're already going through periods of isolation inside there for punishment and chemical agent spray use for punishment and all of that. And I just, that wasn't going to be productive. And I know that's going to be something that people attempt again. So I wish, and I hope with information coming from you all in Norway and different places that people can see that there's a better way and a different way. And, you know, you're still getting up and going to work every day, and your buildings are still standing. Just because you do things differently didn't break everything down. So thank you for doing that.
I want to go back to Ellen for a second. There's an interesting point brought up in the chat around correction staff within the Connecticut department system, correction system. Ellen, are correction staff in Norway, are they unionized? Are there training requirements? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, most of us are in the union. Yeah. But we have 2 years of training, and that includes 1 year in school with subjects like ethics, psychology, other subjects than you might think, and much about the law, of course, but we have 1 year in school, and we have also training 1 year with school. One day in the week during the training period.
When we are out in the prison, the 1 year, we also have 1 to 2 days school at the prison we are practicing in.
We're learning like why people do what they do, and how to speak with them. Actually, it's usually about this.
And also back to the youth inmates. We in the latest years, it's also been in the school. They have put in the knowledge about how the young people's mind are working and things like that. And not working, yeah. So you can meet the young inmates with the knowledge of how they are reacting to be in prison.
He's only 25, so
yeah.
He should know.
So I can see that. Yeah.
Why did you guys want to become prison staff? What made you want to do this as a job?
Yeah, like it's how I see it is very often we're living in it can be one mistake, and then you're in a life of criminal behavior and something like that. And I can see it can happen with my friends. It can happen with everyone, and I just want to work with to get these guys out again, to help them. And one mistake is it's not a sentence of their life.
And the big Halden prison that you maybe seen before, it's opened in our city. We are from Halden, both of us. So for me, it was like also tilfeldig. It was I just applied for work, and I figured I liked this kind of work actually. So
like
we went from there.
Yeah, you meet all kinds of people, you know. It's not like a bunch of crazy guys. It's everyone. So it's good.
But we like working with people. We like to help, and we also like to be. We are strict here too. We are not just giving. We have rules, and we are strict. But we're doing it maybe in the kind way. Yeah.
Bob, I wanted to ask you. It sounded like what Ellen was describing for the training was sort of like a holistic sort of training, kind of grounded and rooted in psychology. Can you tell us a little bit about the training in Connecticut for correction staff and contrast it? Or
well, I haven't worked in the system now for it's been about 15 or 16 years, but I don't think the training has changed substantially. It's a specified period of time in a class at the academy. And by period of time, I'm talking about maybe it's either 4 to 6 weeks with a class of new officers. Their primary function in the training is to teach the tactical stuff necessary to respond to emergencies, There is some discussion of the correctional environment, but most of the time is spent on the mechanics of handling inmates. And I mean, this is a swinging pendulum. Things were much different when I started. I started as a counselor in Haven, and I was running a work release program, and I did not go through training. I didn't learn how to apply restraints and that sort of thing. But now everybody goes through that, even including chaplains and people who are hired in that particular category. There is a period of time known as site sensitization when officers will be deployed to a specific facility or even to the facilities they're ultimately going to be assigned to for a taste that, you know, basically put their feet in the water for a little bit. And then on top of that, there is 40 hours per year of training. And that's about it. Training should emphasize interpersonal communication skills, and I'm certain that there is some of that, but probably not enough and probably not in depth to the point that there is role playing involved for training purposes and so forth. It could be much better. I wonder, from the Norway folks, are correctional staff people respected in the community? Are they held in high regard?
Both yes and no. We are actually, I would say, a little known to the rest of the community, because now in the latest years, it has been more talk about the prisons, and we had some big cases and stuff like this. And of course, we get more publicity because of this, but I'm not sure if, I didn't know we even had correctional officers until I was 20 years old. Mm-hmm. 1 year before I started working in a prison.
We are a closed system for the public. So the public doesn't know that much because everything is, it's closed. But in general, the occupation is we have the police is here, and we are not here. I think, yeah, and they are higher in the society than us. Because we just take care of the prisoners. They take them away from the streets. So yeah.
I have always made the distinction. In my mind, I don't know if other people agree, but I do not identify corrections as being law enforcement. Corrections is something else, but it is not law enforcement. A lot of people disagree with that. I mean, they think that correctional staff are police who work inside closed environments, and that's really should not be the case. But I do know that there were some awful attitudes that were inculcated among our staff people back in the 90s and early 2000s. When I was warden at the Gates facility, I was touring one day and ran into an inmate who I knew from way back. Now, I started in 1970, and I remember this guy when he was basically a kid. And he came up to me, and I said, "Oh, hi, sorry to see you here." Shook his hand, spoke to him for like 30 seconds, walked back by the officer's desk, and he said, "Warden, you shook that guy's hand." I said, "Yes." He said, "They told us at the academy we're not supposed to do that." And I said, "Well, they are wrong." But it's that kind of attitude that I hope has been broken down. But the punitive nature of corrections and the punitive nature of policing is on a swinging pendulum. And it's hard to say where we are at any given point. But right now in this state, things are beginning to go into the wrong direction, I think. And a lot of public attitudes are awful. and of course the racial elements exemplify this and increase them. This is a very sick society. There's no question about that. I could go on like this for hours, but I won't.
I wanted to try to bring in somebody an attendee who has their hand raised. Jordan Wilson, she's Justice Advisor for the Connecticut Justice Alliance. I don't know if I have the power to unmute. So Jordan, would you like to say something or ask a question? So I'm gonna ask another question in the meantime, and hopefully we can get this sorted while this question is getting answered, okay? So there's a good question in the chat. So I'm just going to read it. But in Connecticut and in the United States, much of the issue is the neighborhoods young people come from, poor services, poor education, et cetera. So reintegration into the community has different impacts here. Like if they can't find work or get a decent education, what new options do they have? How is that dealt with in Norway? And how might we deal with that better here in the United States to try to reintegrate young people, given the US's and Connecticut's highly segregated society?
Very often in this correctional service, we are cooperating with different partners. So when the inmates are coming in here, we are sat in contact with their city when they are social services that have followed the inmates, and we are already from the start beginning to make a plan of how we can get this inmate out to the work in school, get him housing and stuff like this. And then we are working with this stuff under the sentence. And also we have some partners we are working with that follow the inmates after the sentence too. So before, under, and after the sentence, they all have the necessary follow up with us and or partners. And sometimes maybe if they are coming from some city like Oslo, a capital, and coming from gangs, stuff like this, maybe we need to move the inmate from that city to a new one after the sentence and get him a new network, new housing, new school, yeah, stuff like that.
We have also especially one partner who is really, really good at this. And we have a close cooperation with this, the Red Cross. Like they are out in the streets, infiltrating the youngest and try to get them on a better pace.
We actually have maybe starting to, or maybe a new project about, it's like it's a company who are state founded, and they are, if the inmates are motivated to get out of the criminal life, they can cooperate with this firm, and they have like apartments around the districts in Norway, and they can house them there, and they follow up them in 24 months. Then they are working close with the inmates in these 24 months, and are getting them jobs, school, stuff like this. But this is not under the sentence, it's after the sentence. But yeah, then it's maybe easier to the inmates to get out of the criminal network.
Interesting. Christina, can you contrast that with your understanding of what the services young folks get when they come out of the system here in Connecticut?
Reentry for young people here, no matter which kind of system they're coming out, whether it's the youth or the adult, sort of leaves much to be desired in terms of connections in the community, how well it goes from when you're discharged from prison back to your community. Somebody made the point in the chat, which I would agree with, that lots of young people come from neighborhoods that historically have been divested in by Connecticut, where resources are not given in terms of education or food or jobs. So they're going back to the same place that almost brought them into the system. So that's not necessarily productive. I think that's something that needs to be worked on, which makes this a bigger issue involving a lot more than just the juvenile or adult justice folks, right? That's going to involve housing and jobs. So it's a bigger issue. I think a lot of folks in Connecticut try to make reentry productive for especially young people, but it isn't always, and somehow connections are lost and young people are not supported and don't have what they need. And I think that would make a big difference. And if you're leaving somewhere where you were told when to eat, when to sleep, all of those things for such a long or even a short period of time, and you were struggling, it would be very beneficial to be sent back home with the tools to help you and your family to be successful.
Connecticut has a pretty complicated system as far as voting goes for the incarcerated. People who are locked up on misdemeanors are eligible to vote. People who are locked up on felonies are not. I was really struck by Andrew's point that folks in the Norwegian system never lose, they're never disenfranchised, they always can vote. Can you talk about why that is? Why is that considered important? And what work does correction staff do to help them to end up casting a ballot?
It's all about the principle of normality, I think. We have the cooperation with the social services there also. They come in here, we get information, we talk to the inmates and ask before an election. Now the election is coming up. Do you want to vote? Use your voice. They say yes or no. And then they come in. The government, not the government, but the employees from the government come in, and the inmates go down to this. We have one big room where we can set everything up. So they will walk in there, put the vote in the real thing. It just looks like a real voting room as everyone else has. So that's how we do it. It's really simple. Simple, yeah. It's really simple. It's a plain, simple thing, actually. We ask them, do you want or not? If you want, you go take the vote, decide what you want to vote for, and put it in.
What's participation like? Like, do the majority of them vote or no?
No. No, I think maybe 40%. But we also have foreign inmates, and they can't vote. So it's, yeah. But maybe 40, yeah.
Interesting.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about mental health care? What sort of mental health services are available for the incarcerated folks there?
Yeah, in the youth team, that we are 5 officers that are working only in the youth team with the young inmates, and we also have a 6th member, and then 6th member is as a child psychologist, yeah, that are working with the mental health care on the inmates, and we also have 2 more that are working with narcotic abuse, and 1 that are from the
outside,
yeah.
From the normal healthcare program. Here we have, I think it's 3 days a week. He is here and take patients. They go to the. We have nurses every day, daytime. 3 nurses. And the doctor is here 1 day a week. So they go down to the nurses, talk to them. We also have physiotherapists for those with pain, other pains. But the healthcare, with the mental health care, we have psychologists. We should have more, but we have some. Because we have almost every inmate needs a psychologist just to get through the time here. But we have those who struggles the most gets help.
Can you talk a little bit more about services for folks who struggle with drugs or alcohol? I mean, is there Do you provide methadone? Is there medication assisted therapy? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we have what do you call it, methadone? Yeah. We have something like this. In Norway, we call it LAR. It's I don't know the word, but they can have this if it's from the doctors outside, and if they have been in the system for this outside, they can have it inside. And the problem is, I saw the question. It's always problems with the dealing of this. They try to, some of them take it and they puke it up and give it to the next person. So it's always problem with drugs either way. So yeah.
We also have two units one here in Esbjerg for the high security, and one in the lower security Trøgstad prison, who is a unit for those who want to work with their drug problem. We have programs for them. The 12 inmates here in Esbjerg and 6 in Trøgstad in low facilities, low security.
And are there also like group therapy sessions or like 12-step programs or something of that nature? Can you talk about like their access to those sorts of recovery programs?
Yeah, we have something like the 12 step. It's not that, but we have a program for them inside. You have to apply to get in there, to get in that unit, and they will be followed up by therapists, officers. They are also officers, but like him, they don't work in uniform. They're working in civilian. And they have, we have 2 psychologists who also is a part of it. And we have a cooperation with a facility outside, where rehabilitation facility, who is working inside the prison. So they can start their rehabilitation inside the prison, and then when they are closing to end the sentence, we send them to this facility outside.
I'd be interested to hear all 3 of your thoughts on this, but this is a broader question. Do you all feel like you're making a difference? I mean, do you feel like generally positive about your job and your working environment? And is there anything that you would change to make it a little better?
Maybe they can give us some more money. But yeah, of course, like it's how you see it. You make difference in maybe a smaller, what do you call it? Maybe you're not changing a life all the time, but maybe you can change some smaller things, right?
Planting some seeds.
Yeah, planting some seeds, as we say. It's like maybe how the perspective they have or things like that. So it's maybe if you're going to work and thinking like, okay, today I'm gonna make a new inmate, not doing criminal things. I think you will maybe quit the next day. But it's how you see it. It's what goals you are setting yourself and things like that. So yeah.
We put it in a bigger perspective because when the officers go to work every day here, I think almost everybody thinks that, okay, today we are having a good day together, and it often is a good day.
For me and Jonas that are working in the youth team, we have the possibility to take young inmates outside the prison and walk in the woods, doing sport like tennis, something like that. And these are young guys that, meaningful activities that these guys maybe have never experienced. And we can give these guys good experience like this. That can be meaningful for us too, of course.
Would you say the purpose of your job and the prison system as a whole is fundamentally rehabilitative to make sure that these folks don't come back?
Yeah, fundamentally, yeah.
Okay. That was my last question. It's a simpler one, but thank you for everybody's time, and I'll turn it back over to Andrew to wrap us up.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for your time today. I know, Ellen, you mentioned you don't take statistics on what we call recidivism or return to prison, but we have over time found some articles on essentially what's deemed as success rates for folks returning to the community from Norway. And we know that it's roughly between 12 and 20% that return to prison, as opposed to 50% within 3 years here in Connecticut, and up to 70% being rearrested within 3 years. So, I mean, of course, there's always more work to be done to find out the details of systems, but just in general terms, what you do is not only humane, but it works. It works in terms of the individuals. It seems like it works in terms of your well-being, and it works for the larger society in terms of less re-victimization, and I think generally a more positive experience within the justice system, which we know is important for those that are involved in it. So we thank you so much for sharing your perspective, and didn't get to formally introduce Jonas and Sander. So thank you. We didn't mention your names, but maybe you didn't want to, but we do appreciate your being a part of this. And it's the first time for me meeting you, and just a real pleasant to be able to do so. We have one more planned in our series left, and we have an individual who's been working in the Norwegian system, helping to set up how Norway works with children within corrections since 2008. So he'll be able to talk a little bit more about implementation and the overall design. I know there were some questions about that. And we may have a few others too, we'll see. As I mentioned in the chat, we're looking to continue this as much as possible, and perhaps even visit you all there in Ostfold, and maybe go to Halden as well, although we know that's a famous one, but we certainly would love to visit you and really learn a little bit more, and have folks that have been directly impacted be able to experience what you all experience on a day-to-day basis, to see what's possible, what is possible in bringing back to Connecticut here. So again, thank you all so much. I really appreciate it. And I know it's the end of your day. Your day is actually probably officially over. So we thank you for being here. And thank you, Christina and Bob. And last but not least, I want to thank Kelan. I don't know, I think he has one more story to drop, but this is probably his last in-person virtual visit with us here in Connecticut, at least for some time. We'll keep his phone number handy, but he is going to be moving on down to North Carolina, doing similar work there. But I just want to say, Kelan, we appreciate you. We appreciate what you've done in Connecticut. It's not often that you have a journalist spend the time to tell stories in a meaningful way, and to do the work to really give the people of Connecticut a sense of what's going on in only a way that a journalist can. And we really appreciate that. And thank you. And thank you for taking the time in your busy schedule to participate today. So cheers to you, and best of luck in your future endeavors. And thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.